Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. First hazardous warning graphic. We'll start here, Bristol Bay up into the Kuskokwim Valley, southern Kuskokwim Valley, Sleep, Mute, and Aniak in those areas. That's for tonight until, let's see, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and that's for anywhere from 4 to 6 inches additional snow to fall throughout these areas, mostly over the northern areas here, north and northwest of Iliamna here, kind of away from the coastline. And then up here along the Alaska Range, eastern Alaska Range, there's a winter weather advisory out, 2 to 4 inches of snow expected to fall there in some areas, but the gusty winds through the passes will continue to gust above 50 miles an hour. And that's out through Saturday as well. And then back here to the west from the Kobuk Valley on out into the Seward Peninsula, winter weather advisories for snow and areas of blowing snow through tomorrow, with a winter storm warning out for the St. Lawrence Island area through 6 p.m. Saturday, and the Bering Strait coast for visibilities reduced to a quarter mile or less in snow, and blowing snow could pick up anywhere from 4 to 10 inches there, St. Lawrence Island, with those winds continuing to gust 60 miles an hour, maybe even a little stronger. And then up here, winter storm warning out Koyukuk Valley up into the Brooks Range there around Arctic Village. That's for up to 10 more inches of snow to fall in those areas, and that's out through tomorrow afternoon as well. So moving on to the satellite imagery, you can see strong storm system here, kind of a raptor-shaped pattern here, raptor claw patterns, I was informed today, pulling northwestward here, bringing storm force winds along all of the outer coastline into the eastern North Gulf Coast today. So far, most of the strongest winds have been staying to the west of the land areas there, but coastal areas picking up gusts above 50 miles an hour during the afternoon today on up into the Gulf of Alaska. And rain with this, mostly just grazing the coastline here. A little bit of rain getting into Yakutat, but the bulk of the moisture funneled right up into the North Gulf Coast here, Prince William Sound, and the Kenai Peninsula. 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Seward picked up over 2 inches of rainfall. Portage Glacier had over 4 inches of rain, while Valdez picked up around ½ an inch, and Cordova about 0.8 of an inch. Otherwise, mostly clouds here over the eastern interior until you get back to the west. Snow reported this afternoon from Iliamna, moving to Kamishak Bay, northward along the western Alaska Range, and Kuskokwim Valley today. McGrath had several inches of snow during the daytime hours today, with that area of snow pushing back to the northwest, but strong northeast winds cutting the snow off Kotzebue and Kivalina, Point Hope, and Cape Lisburne, with winds gusting over 50 miles an hour there at Point Hope, temperature 8 degrees. So that definitely puts the wind chill down below zero. Those winds coming through the Bering Strait coast, catching the western part of St. Lawrence Island, Gamble, north, 55 miles per hour for those wind gusts, but Savunga had less than 10 miles an hour on the winds due to their proximity to the low center. But the low drifting eastward, so those strong winds will get into that area as well over the next, well, probably by this evening. Otherwise, cold air flowing southward across the Bering Sea, snow occurring in the Pribilof Islands, gusty west winds as high as 35 miles an hour there, with snow all the way down to the eastern Aleutians, western Alaska Peninsula, snow showers on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula up to the northeast there. And again, drier conditions on the lee side of the mountains, Showers ended Kodiak Island, maybe a little bit of clearing this afternoon. Next front is yet to spread rain into Shemya, but will at any time. You can see right in this area that'll be pushing eastward over the weekend. Still see it's back out to the west, main low center, back even farther to the west off the chart. Got the cold low here associated with the cold upper level low near St. Lawrence Island. Again, just pulling east of the area there, so you can see the tight gradient here will be following that in with look for definitely in the increase in the winds. Temperatures will continue to drop. Tight gradient here along the northwest coast, and areas of blowing snow from the western Brooks Range, with snow along this cold front extending down into the Alaska Range there all the way down to Kamishak Bay, and then scattered showers really ended here for Kodiak Island. Those northwest, drier northwest flow kicking in. Heavy rain here, western Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula. Dry over the eastern interior. Pretty windy, though, through the Alaska Range with gusts again up to 50 miles an hour during the day today. And the band of rain just now reaching onto the coastline there with the increasing winds as well along the coast. This low will pull northwestward to about this position by 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, with the winds gradually diminishing over the panhandle as that front edges eastward, but they won't end altogether here. And rain will definitely increase this evening and push inland with rain all the way down into Dixon Entrance with this, and otherwise areas of snow up here over the interior, blowing snow northwest coast, St. Lawrence Island, and then areas of snow and snow showers. Kind of a widespread area here, the cold air passing over the open water there. So pretty good snowfall could occur here along the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, and possibly still mixed a little as this ridge edges eastward, so it'll pull a little bit milder air in, but those snow showers will be tapering off for Dutch Harbor, Alaska, and Nikolsky, and a little bit of a break coming into the Pribilofs. Warm front spreads rain here in across the Aleutians tonight. Main low center now into the picture here just southwest of Shemya, and then in another system down here to the south developing. That'll be moving northward for tomorrow, tracks up to about this position. Back into the storm force winds for the Panhandle. You see very tight gradient here, so definitely full gales over the inside waters, possibly even storm warnings out for the Clarence Strait area, with rain back on the increase once again, heaviest along the coast. Looks like heaviest rain tomorrow will be more over toward the Yakutat area, in toward Elfin Cove and Sitka than it was today. Just maybe some mixed rain and snow, depending on your elevation here, right along the coastline, Kenai Peninsula. Looks like snow, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley. To a lesser extent for the Matanuska Valley, Copper River Basin, this pattern is still southerly, so don't look for a whole lot of precipitation there right up into the 40-mile country, upper Tanana Valley. But this trough here, kind of the advance or the demarcation line between the colder Arctic air back to the west, bare chance of snow here. Of course, snow, Koyukuk Valley up to the Brooks Range, Arctic coastal areas, snow and blowing snow. Not so much in the blowing snow from the northwest coast, but definitely from the Bering Strait coast at St. Lawrence Island. And snow showers here, Bristol Bay, back into the Bering Sea, kind of tapering off, and then increasing southeast winds, with rain and snow pushing into the Pribilofs. Wet and windy for the Aleutians, spreading toward the Fox Islands and Alaska Peninsula. And then that front makes a pretty good jog to the east here by Sunday afternoon, right there to Kodiak Island, with wind and rain there throughout the day. Really windy and wet here for the Aleutians, mostly in the form of rain here right along the Aleutians. Pribilofs, a mixture north of this trough axis in the low center, all snow wrapping back into the western Aleutians. Snow and blowing snow, not so bad on Sunday there for St. Lawrence Island, but still look for some blowing snow. Snow in the north, drier over the southern interior. Rain with this trough into the Panhandle. Lows for tonight, upper 30s, lower 40s for the Panhandle. Below zero, 10 to 15 below for the Arctic coast. See colder temperatures here up the Alaska Range, mid-30s south central Alaska, into the teens into the Kuskokwim Valley. Highs tomorrow afternoon, mid to upper 30s south central Alaska. Upper 20s, though, Copper River Basin, well below zero for the Arctic coast, and 40s for the Panhandle. Lows for the following morning, 15 to 25 below now for the Arctic coast into the North Slope, and lows into the lower to mid-20s south central Alaska. Single numbers to Kuskokwim Valley, lower 20s back out toward the southwest coast. 30s for the Panhandle, highs 40s for the southeast coast there, staying below zero on the Arctic coast, and lower 30s for south central Alaska, 40s for the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather tomorrow morning, you've got a swath of IFR here, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, southwestward to the Brooks Range, southward here, Kuskokwim Valley, and edging in to southern Cook Inlet along the Alaska Range, Kodiak Island, up along the North Gulf Coast IFR, with a narrow band down along the central north coast of the Panhandle. Out to the west, IFR with that next big storm out over the Aleutians. We'll see that advances slowly eastward tomorrow afternoon, or actually makes a decent jog to the east here, exiting Adak late, but IFR for Atka. Swath of VFR coming into the Pribilofs and the eastern Aleutians temporarily. And this area IFR now beginning to dissipate in the southern areas, but holding pretty steady there up across central interior, Koyukuk Valley, on out to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. IFR, Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, on down along the coastal areas of the Panhandle. And for Sunday, that nudges inland a little bit. There begins to overtake the southeast coast. IFR up here for the North Gulf Coast. Northward, another batch up there over the Brooks Range and western North Slope. And that front pushing eastward, but narrowing this band out along the Alaska Peninsula and Pribilofs, improving over the Aleutians, and even better for the afternoon. Looks like areas of EFR for the entire Aleutian chain. Marginal for the Alaska Peninsula, narrow band of IFR holding over the Pribilofs into Kuskokwim Bay, northern Bristol Bay, Kamishak Bay, Barren Islands, southern Cook Inlet. Not too bad in the interior. Marginal VFR with areas of VFR breaking out. IFR for the Panhandle. And for passes, IFR for Anatuvik. And for Adigan, though, marginal VFR gradually becoming IFR. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, look for pretty much IFR the entire day, as well as rainy. Windy, though, kind of marginal VFR at times, and actually turning toward more of a marginal VFR condition here on the southern entrance. And for Isabel, marginal VFR, and we'll go marginal VFR late in the day here. Not too bad for Montasta, but late in the day, probably marginal on the southern entrance. Tanita, marginal VFR, could improve. Looks like some drier air slips up tomorrow afternoon, so improving there. But Portage, IFR, and Chilkoot and White, both passes there, IFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 to 4,000 feet here, with 4,000 feet over southern Dixon entrance. Otherwise at the surface, North Gulf Coast, down along the Alaska Peninsula, colder air coming into the Bering Sea here. So at the surface now, south of the Pribilofs, and 2,000 feet with that southwest jet just getting far enough north to nudge a little bit of warmer air into the central Aleutians, but that will be shifting eastward instead of northward. And then for icing, considerable moderate rime icing with that strong front here and southerly flow coming up into the eastern North Gulf Coast. And just starting to increase along the coast of the Panhandle tomorrow afternoon. Areas of lighter icing here into south central Alaska, all the way up to the Arctic coast. And some mixed icing, nothing too serious out here along the west coast. And then narrow band of considerable moderate with that front and the storm out to the west. And for the jet stream, southeast flow here coming up to the North Gulf Coast, carrying a lot of moisture with it. High pressure western Canada. Cold upper low here coming slowly eastward, two linking up, could result in some pretty good snows in some areas. And jet stream here just grazing the central Aleutians, but staying south. And for 9,000 feet, strong flow here along the southeast coast. 65 knots, 55 knots over the inland areas, up to 70 knots cutting in across the eastern Copper River Basin, Alaska Range areas, with much lighter winds here to the west, but picking up to 30 knots again along the coast, and really strong winds out there with that storm of the Aleutians, 55 to 75 knots. And taking a look at 3,000 feet, a little bit lighter out here, but still pretty brisk, 40 to 55 knot west-southwesterlies, and break there with weak ridging over the Pribilof shifting eastward, 25 knot westerlies there into Kuskokwim Bay. Lighter winds over the interior, kind of a spread out pattern here, a couple of low centers, and then the stronger one slowly coming northward here. Strong winds along the southeast coast of 55 to 65 knots, mostly along and off the coast here at this elevation, still up to 45 knots over towards Stewart. And northwest 40, southern Kodiak Island. Turbulence, occasional moderate chop here with some areas of severe turbulence for small aircraft here below about 8,000 feet. Along the Panhandle, moderate chop North Gulf Coast into the southeast interior. Moderate chop here with the northerly winds from the northwest coast through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. Possible severe turbulence with the main low center out over the western Aleutians, otherwise moderate chop advancing eastward to the Fox Islands. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
We always knew the site was there, but we thought it was gone due to erosion. My grandfather would tell about the bow and arrow wars, about two kids, playing with darts. And one eye was poked, so the other kid's father came and did the same thing. So from that, it became a full-blown war. To see this excavation bring that story alive is one of the most fascinating things I've seen. I mean, the stories we've heard and the evidence they're pulling out from Nunasha, it's no longer a legend, it's becoming a fact.
My name is Rick Connect, and I'm principal investigator of the project. We have 11 PhDs. We use a lot of student volunteers. We work with professional conservators to make it all happen. We've got Dr. Paul Ledger, who's working on the history of climate here. Dr. Veronique Forbes, who's an archaeoentomologist who studies insects. Dr. P.T. Ashlock, who's also a professional archaeologist from Southeast Alaska. Dr. Madonna Moss is from the University of Oregon, who specializes in faunal analysis.
There are mussel shells throughout this site. There's another bigger piece, and we don't know where they're coming from.
The Nunalak site was originally a village. Elders tell us that this site extended out about 200 feet. Since 2009, we've lost more than 30 feet on that piece of shoreline. And our 2009 and 2010 excavation blocks are completely gone already. It's very much a race against time. But this particular structure with a covered boardwalk running down the middle of it was an adaptation to the bow and arrow wars. That was a period of intense conflict between different native villages here in the YK Delta. And no one knew exactly when it had happened other than it happened before the Russians arrived. This collective communal house was burned down by attackers from another village up the Kuskokwim. We think it happened about 1640 based on carbon dates of the charred grass and so on the floor.
We've been excavating Nunasha for about 6 years now. I sent Rick a few pictures of artifacts I had from the locals. He came right over. He didn't even unpack. He went down the beach and they started walking and they started finding artifacts. Those first group was a tough bunch. There's these 3 students and a professor that come down and start looking for artifacts. Wind, rain, shine, they do it. My mind was saying, man, these guys are crazy. But they're trying to beat the erosions.
We get bugs, we get weather, we get wind, we get rain. Ouch, there's one now. And so they're pretty challenging conditions. We put in as many hours as we physically can, 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, just so we can get to it in time.
Pizza! Give me P-I-Z-Z-A!
Rick's just great. He doesn't stop. He's a perfect person for this site. I wouldn't have no one else run this site except him.
Well, I first came to Alaska to work as a graduate student in 1983, and luckily it was a preserved site much like this one in Kodiak. And that one was also eroding, and we worked hard to get a sample from that, but at the same time our assumption was there were going to be more sites like that, and the whole thing washed out. There wasn't even a rock, a firecrack rock left behind. That was shocking. And we ended up only getting a 10% sample at best, and that's not going to happen again. We're getting things that normally you just see in museum collections. We've got arrows with the feathers still lashed to them, grass rope that was used to make dog harnesses, that kind of preservation.
There's a piece of hair right here. I found that in my screen. PT found a ridiculously large amount of hair, and Bridget found another huge clump of hair today. It seems like when they cut their hair, they just let it fall wherever it wanted to, so. There's the lamp. The hair is kind of sticking out right there. It's all over the place, actually. There's been way hairier lamps, too. It's like, oh, you find hair, and you're like, oh, this is like a hair sample, and then you dig a little more, and then it's actually a lamp.
Bridget found an earring in the screen.
Yeah, that's definitely fawn.
Yeah. And then I would have it goes up to about there, I think. So I don't know how they actually wore them, like how it fit in.
Yeah, they kind of look like clip-ons.
Yeah.
I've heard that we're up to around 30,000 museum quality pieces, which will be coming back to Queen Hawk in 2017. We're hoping to get a cultural center built here, and then I'm hoping all the artifacts will remain in the village.
We estimate the site might have 5 to 10 years left, maximum. It could be lost in one big winter storm. It's like museums on fire or a library, and you have to rush in and save as many books and pieces of art as you can. And we're seeing things that people remember from their childhoods. Elders have a chance to reacquaint themselves and their children with tangible remains of their heritage.
Yeah, this project's been great. I'm just honored to be part of it, a small part of it.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, filling in here in the Chukchi Sea now quite rapidly. Cold air coming southward will continue for the next several days. So this is going to fill in quite a bit here over the next 3 days or so, all the way down in toward or north of the Bering Strait, with even some increase here continuing Norton Sound along possibly Yukon Delta coast. Moving on to coastal water forecasts for tomorrow. Again, storm warnings through this evening drop off, and then that next system coming up brings them back again tomorrow. 45 to mostly 50 knots out of the southeast, seas either side of 20 feet. Small craft advisories over the southern and central inside waters, with seas as high as 10 feet in Clarence Strait, and southeast 20 for northern Lynn Canal, 4-foot seas. Lighter winds in store for Sunday, but gale force gusts in the forecast for Clarence Strait for 35 knots, otherwise southeast 15, central and northern inside waters. And then northwest gales here along the south coast of the Panhandle, seas just under 20 feet. Small craft advisories on the north coast with west-northwesterlies. Prince William Sound, south 30 knots, 7-foot seas tomorrow, 45 knots out of the south here for the eastern North Gulf Coast with 24-foot seas. Westerlies 30 knots, western North Gulf Coast, seas just under 20 feet. Full gales here, Barren Islands out of the west right into Kamishak Bay, 40 knots, west 30 knots, southern Cook Inlet, south 25 knots north of the Forelands. Light south westerlies for Sunday here, northern Cook Inlet, southwest 15 south of the Forelands, west 20 knots for Kamishak Bay, 30 knots here for the Barren Islands. And small craft advisory, southwest winds 25 to 30 for the North Gulf Coast, southerlies at 20 for Prince William Sound. Gale force winds for Shelikof Strait tomorrow out of the northwest, west 30 knots with gale force gusts out of the western bays here at Kodiak Island. Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, west 25 knots. Bering Sea side of the peninsula, west 30 knots, west 25 for Bristol Bay. Sunday, southeast 30 for the bay there with 5-foot seas. Southwest 20 Shelikof Strait, 30 knots, east side of Kodiak. Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, gale force winds out of the southwest, Bering Sea side of the peninsula, same thing, southwest 35, 15-foot seas. And for the western Aleutians tomorrow, here these western zones, southwest 40 to 45 knots, seas as high as 32 feet out toward Chimianat 2. And then we've got small craft advisories for the central Aleutians, south to mostly south on average here at about 30 knots, and small craft advisories south-southwest 25 for the Fox Islands. Then 40-knot gales come in there for Sunday, extending back at least to Nikolsky, actually southwest 40 all the way back to AKwx, with seas running anywhere from 20 to 30 feet. And then westerlies 40 knots, 32-foot seas, AKwx to say Amchitka Island, drop off to 30 knots out of the northwest. And then for Norton Sound tomorrow, north 15, but gales across St. Lawrence Island, west-northwest 30 knots along the southwest coast, with small craft advisories for both St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs. For Sunday, north 30 knots, St. Lawrence Island, easterly gales, north of Nunivak Island, southeast 30 south of the island, northwest 25 for the Pribilofs, northeast 35 for the St. Matthew Island zone. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northerlies 10 to 15, about the same there for the central coast. Small craft advisories here for the western coast, all the way down to Cape Thompson, with gale force northerlies from Cape Thompson all the way to the Bering Strait or Wales. And then for Sunday, a little lighter, still northerlies at about 30 knots here for the Chukchi Sea, turning northeast Cape Thompson, falling back to 25 on the western coast. 15-knot winds out of the northeast, central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast. For tonight, that low pulling northwestward here, so storm force warnings this evening here, eastern North Gulf Coast down the Panhandle, diminishing after this evening with heavy rain along the North Gulf Coast, increasing rain into the Panhandle. Winter storm warnings out for the Koyukuk Valley up into the Central Brooks Range chute tomorrow, as well as St. Lawrence Island, with winds gusting as high as 60 miles an hour to the Bering Strait coast, up to 10 inches of snow in both those warning areas, with snow pushing into Cook Inlet possibly, or mixed rain and snow, staying rain right along the coastline. And then for tomorrow, again, that rain snow line right along the coast, snow to the north, and more snow back here to the west with that other trough. Next storm bringing storm force winds back into the Panhandle with rain heavy at times, with the heavy rain now farther to the east. Big storm keeps it windy and wet over the Aleutians and Bering Sea. Then that pushes northeastward, more precipitation to the southwest coast. Snow continues in the north.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.